Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 28, 2023 Left Board meeting. I'd like to call us to order. Before we jump into our agenda, I'd like to take a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters, as well as our military members. All right, thank you very much. We have a few items on the agenda for today. I'd like to thank those who are here today, as well as those that are online. Looking at our first agenda item is approval of the June 28, 2023 minutes as posted and shared. Entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Make sure I'm not missing anybody. Tim, if you see somebody raise their hand, let me know. So, all right, not seeing any comments or questions from the group. All those in favor of adoption say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are adopted. All right, thank you. All right, for our first item, our second item of business is a request for legislation. And Matt, I think you're online this morning, Matt Smith. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Lawson and members of the board. For the record, my name is Matt Smith. I'm the state actuary. And really thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief presentation to you, and thanks staff for driving the presentation for me. Move on to the next slide. I'll give you a little bit of introduction. Very short presentation today. Want to share with you a draft request legislation that I'd like to submit for the 2024 legislative session. Really appreciate your feedback if you have any, whether that's today or after the presentation. And then talk about next steps and respond to any questions. Again, a very, very short presentation. On the next slide, thought I'd just start with some background. So what is this legislation about? It's updating a particular RCW that specifies the powers and duties of the Office of the State Actuary. It's really all duties. I don't think there's any powers listed in this RCW, and the legislation I'm bringing to you would only be updating duties. You might be asking, why is this needed? Well, portions of this law are outdated, and they're not consistent with the practices of our office any longer, or the practices of the legislature. And just as an example, the fiscal note requirement, the actuarial fiscal note requirement that's in this law was created in 1986 and has not been updated since 1986. The bill draft is in your materials if it's something you want to take a look at. Otherwise, it's there for your reference after the meeting. On the next slide, I'll walk you through. I'm calling this a sectional walkthrough, but really it's a subsectional walkthrough because there's only one section in this bill. And again, if it's something you want to open up and look at, it's in your materials. Otherwise, you can look at this after the meeting if you would like. So subsection 2 removes a duty where the office advises on investment policies of the State Investment Board. To my knowledge, the office has never provided this service. I've been with the office for 25 years of its 46-year history. We've never provided this service during that 25-year period. It's possible the office did this very early on when it was created. I also believe that our office lacks the qualifications to provide this duty. The next subsection where you see most of the changes is subsection 4. And this is really just that section is all about actuarial fiscal note requirements. So the changes would align those requirements with our current practices, the standards of practice that apply to actuaries to do that type of work, and also would align current practices with current practices of the legislature. You'll see there's some outdated practices there that I don't believe the legislature follows or maybe even ever followed. And then just stepping back, the changes really allow for the greater application of judgment, because some of that language is very prescriptive, and one size approach for a fiscal note rarely fits all fiscal notes or all bills. And then subsection 5 just clarifies some of the additional services that we provide for the legislature. So that's it on the walking through the bill. It's very short. These changes I think they're fairly minor. And then on the next slide and the last slide before questions, just next steps. So again, here to get your feedback if you have it. Definitely open to revising the bill draft if there's changes that have unintended consequences or if we missed something. I'm sharing this bill draft with other stakeholders. I'm kind of in that process right now. I will be presenting this the same or similar presentation to the Select Committee on Pension Policy at their meeting in July. And lastly, if the board has interest in co-recommending this legislation, I certainly would appreciate that. If we have mutual interests, I could bring back the final request legislation later in the interim if that's something you would like to do or see. And with that, thank you again for offering me this opportunity to share this with you. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Matt? Not seeing anybody. Tim, see anybody? No, I think that's it, Matt. Appreciate it. I look forward to actually seeing the final legislation as you move forward. That way we can determine later on if we want to jump in as a board and support.
Mr. Chair, if you wanted, you could move to put it on the agenda for the follow-up in the November meeting.
Perfect.
And then Matt could plan on that and we could plan on that as well.
That'd be great.
But that would take a motion.
I think Jay's heading there.
So moved. So moved.
And it's been moved and seconded to place this issue on our November 2023 agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 I think he was a yay. So, all right. We the votes have it. So Matt, we'll go ahead and place this on our November agenda. Have Steve will work with you if we have any other questions. But so thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number two on our agenda is the firefighter definition briefing. And Steve, you got anything background besides Jacob?
Yes. This was a meeting or a topic that was discussed by the board at your last meeting, and the board voted to put that on the work plan for this interim. So we're getting a jump start on that since this one's already been approved, and Jacob is going to do the initial presentation today. It's a topic that staff worked on with DRS last year, but it really never came to the board. So it's sort of a newer topic for many of you. There was legislation on it last session that didn't pass. I'll let Jacob talk about all the rest of it. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
If you said it correctly now. There we go. Okay, just for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. So the issue in front of the board today is that some promotional positions within a fire department may be considered PERS positions by Department of Retirement Systems, which may limit the employer's ability to fill those positions. It may limit those because firefighters may be unwilling to move into those positions knowing that they're going to miss out on years of service in left to and instead have be in PERS. And I should add that part of where there's concern with this happening is the changes in how fire departments are structured, that you're seeing larger fire departments with regional fire authorities, and those in some instances are creating more administrative positions or more positions that are specialist as they get larger. So what is a firefighter? This is a question that I would have thought was really simple before I started working for LEF. But it gets complicated, and it is more complicated than what is a law enforcement officer due to their commissioning process, where firefighters do not have a process as clear as that. So whether a person qualifies as a firefighter depends on who the employer is and the nature of the position. It's a two-part test. The first part's pretty simple as far as working at a fire department, not that there aren't still issues there. but not the issue that we're discussing here. And then you must be actively employed as a full-time firefighter. And so when you see that RCW definition, it can sound a bit circular in that you're a firefighter if your employer says you're a firefighter, is kind of how it reads. And so that's left it into with Department of Retirement Systems over decades to develop rules. And so those rules are complex, and you can see that they kind of just go on and on as they've tried to kind of plug up holes or respond to lawsuits over the years to deal with some of the issues that have come up. And so this next quote there is from is one part I pulled from the DRS WAC that is most at issue with what we're discussing today, and that's that it must the position must direct or perform fire protection activities required for and directly concerned with preventing, controlling, and extinguishing fires. So tried to put some emphasis there on the word "and," because that "and extinguishing fires" is the part that tends to or that is kind of driving this concern. And then I did just want to add for clarity here that or the position can supervise other firefighters, which is not what we're talking about here, but just as we move forward with this discussion, keep that in mind, that there are some positions that you may think of, well, they're not going out and extinguishing fires, but they may very clearly supervise other firefighters, and so we don't have to worry about that for those positions. And then I did want to add in, Steve touched on this briefly, but we've worked with DRS. I think he's worked with DRS for years on this, but in last year, those talks really ramped up as we tried to work with them to develop a rule to address these concerns. And what we found out from talking to the employer support part of Department of Retirement Systems is that in practice, what they really look at when they're reviewing these positions is, does the position description say anywhere that this position is, not literally his words, but is the position going to possibly get on a truck, go out and fight fires? It doesn't have to be a certain percentage of the job. There just has to be that possibility that they do. And then if there is that possibility, then the employer would be required to have the gear for that person. That person would be required to have up to date in all their training. I'll go ahead and admit this now because AJ knows, but the fit test, I just assumed had to do with being in shape and not that it was a mask fit test. So that's also something that Department of Retirement Systems would look at. Does the person have an up-to-date mask fit test? So last session, like I said, and Steve talked about, we were in discussions with DRS last interim, so there wasn't an opportunity for the board to really discuss this issue. I think we did update the board just generally on it when we touched on all of the rules we were working on DRS with and the administrative updates. But right before session, reached a point in our discussions with DRS that we weren't going to move forward with rulemaking, that they didn't believe they could do so, that it would take a change in legislation to address these concerns of these promotional positions. And so there was legislation that took the kind of the language we had worked with DRS on, the DRS felt would require a bill. And so so that legislation is here on the slide here. The Senate version of it did pass through Senate Ways and Means, but was not pulled to the floor for any action. And then the House version of it did not receive a hearing. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for the bill. Well, I guess I'll just touch on, there was some concern about the language. So what the language of the bill did was it tried to say that if you were an experienced firefighter working in a fire, if the position you were entering required you to be an experienced firefighter and it was at a fire department, then you would remain in the LEF. there was some concern about that expressed during session, that it may grab too many positions that were, there might be unintended consequences to who could be included in that. There were no positions that I at least heard of, or I believe Steve heard of, that would be caught up in that, but there was just that concern. And I think during session, with how quickly things move, there wasn't really an opportunity to look into that more and see, was that true or not? And was there possibly a better way of some other language that could capture these concerns, but not accidentally grab, some unintended positions? So I have some hypotheticals to go through to hopefully be a bit more clear about what kind of concerns there are. And so this first hypothetical would be firefighter trainers. So a fire department has full-time firefighter trainer positions. So once again, this is a larger department. They're not being asked to go out and fight fires while they're in these trainer positions, because they're, I would assume, just cycling through so many people that are going through training, that's a full-time job. They don't supervise any LEF employees, and so they are required as firefighter trainers. They have equipment, they have up-to-date mask fit test. Would these positions be in LEF or not? So these are just hypotheticals. They're not ones that DRS has actually analyzed and given a firm answer on, but just ones where we believe there would be an argument currently for them to not be in LEF, or possibly to remain in LEF. And then same with this one. This one's a management position. Regional Fire Authority has a position in charge of logistics, such as purchasing firefighting equipment, supplies, etc., and supervising a group of non-LEF employees. So they've got some PERS employees underneath them. The position requires an experienced firefighter due to their expertise of firefighting. And you can see where that would come in handy when you're purchasing firefighting equipment and supplies. So positions not required to respond to fire calls, they do not have equipment, and they do not have an up-to-date mask fit test. Should that position be in LEF or not, is the question. And if there's concerns about that, wanting to firm up that definition to make sure it remains in LEF. So just an initial briefing today, so short presentation. If the board would like to receive a comprehensive briefing, in the comprehensive briefing, we would start to look for more examples of this and develop some possible language to address concerns for the board to consider further. So the board could make a motion now to receive a comprehensive briefing on this, or could wait until my later presentation where we go over all of the potential topics for the interim and then make a decision at that point whether you'd like to receive a comprehensive briefing or not at this time. So that completes that presentation. If there's any questions, be happy to answer.
Go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Burney. Just kind of a running conversation on this. We have vehicles that are sitting out there in zombie status for the coming short session here on this, and the potential to have something that can be amended that has already got traction through Ways and Means in the Senate, for example, and roll it back to second reading with the amendments that might make it more palatable here. Seems like we should actually go directly to a comprehensive evaluation on this, so we have some insight to exactly what we can do on this, and maybe have time to shop it around a little bit and find out, if we're stepping on anybody's toes. Just a thought. So I think going to a comprehensive briefing on this would not be a bad idea. Second thing is that when you talk about the trainers on this, and being a flatfoot, the host draggers are going to have to actually educate me on this, but you have certain positions out there that they had people when they retire come back and fulfill in a PERS capacity or something else out there, that they do that intentionally. When you have a trainer, is that something traditionally that you'd have somebody who would retire from LEF and then fill a trainer position out there, expecting to be able to come back and do that completely outside of LEF? And are we accomplishing what we want to accomplish without actually, just disrupting the flow of things as they currently exist for people through a career continuum, considering that we retire so early?
Historically, the training officers that are out there now are not retirees. And that actually touches on one of the potential issues also that this bill could address is LEF. If you come back to work in a firefighting position, you're mandated back into membership. LEF is the only plan that doesn't have any kind of retire, rehire. You can come back to work in a PERS position in LEF, and you could still get your LEF pension and you could get your PERS salary. So there has been concern in the past that that would create loopholes potentially for abuse. And the board has talked about things in the past where, somebody comes back to work part-time because they're only working 159 hours and 45 minutes a month. Those kind of things. Well, this would potentially be another issue if DRS does consider these PERS positions. Now have you opened up potentially a whole nother group of people that could retire out of LEF and come back to work and still get their pension and get their salary at the same time.
Exactly.
That's sort of some of the unintended consequences that Jacob was talking about with this bill. And those would be things that we could flesh out further in a comprehensive briefing. Make sure that the language covers who you want it to cover, excludes who you want to exclude.
Fair enough.
Jay, go ahead.
I just want to add, I certainly think this needs a more comprehensive discussion. I mean, one of the questions I have is how does this relate to law enforcement side of things? Because we certainly have admin positions in law enforcement that oversee admin staff. So I'd be interested in kind of what those definitions look like. And is there anything we can glean or learn from those definitions so that they're consistent? And then, Jacob used a really great example, which is as we look at the admin and regional fire authorities, you're talking about fire departments that are now taking on a much higher level of administrative support. They're becoming their own municipality with their own management structures, their own finance people, their own IT staff, and in looking at that, a lot of times it's deputy chiefs or assistant chiefs that take on the role of oversight of that admin staff, and that's what they're doing on a day-over-day basis. I certainly make the argument that that's related to fire service. 100%. But when you look at the definitions, I can see where the blurred lines are. And so I think we owe it to the profession in terms of how that profession is evolving to let the definitions evolve with it. And so I definitely think this needs more work.
Thank you. As far as the law enforcement question you raised, we actually did have a case where it was a newly hired deputy chief, and the employer was being advised that would be a PERS position. But in working with the employer, it was because the employer description didn't specifically require that the deputy chief retain their certification. So law enforcement officers have to be certified. Once they changed the job description to require that they remain that they keep their certification, DRS said then they can stay in LEF. So that issue has come up, but it hasn't come up yet where it's been proved unsolvable. But it could. You can see law enforcement organizations heading down that same path, consolidation that fire has.
Other questions or comments? So I know that at least the two of you have mentioned about the comprehensive study. And I think for action, if we were going to do it now, we can wait, or we can do it now. So if we're going to do it now, we do need a motion, correct?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's fine. Go ahead.
So I'll make a motion that we request a comprehensive report from the staff on this particular issue.
A second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded for a comprehensive report on the definition of firefighter. Is there any questions or comments? Further questions or comments? See any? Tim, you see any? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion to adopt passes. Thank you. Thanks, Jacob. All right. Looks like you're still in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Number 4. You want to do a background?
Yeah, this next issue. The board, as you'll recall, one of your primary duties is adopting the contribution rates for LEF 2. Those can be the base contribution rates that you adopt every biennium, and it can also be a supplemental contribution rate that's adopted whenever there's new legislation and the actuary determines that that increases the cost of the plan. There was new legislation last session that increased the cost of the plan. And so Jacob's here to give you the preview of that and a surprise twist. I'll leave that cliffhanger out there.
Okay, for the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. Issue in front of the board today is that during last session, a supplemental rate may be necessary due to the passage of the interruptive military service credit bill. That was the board endorsed bill last session. I should add that the law allows LEF 2 to adopt the supplemental rate, but it does not require it. So just a little bit of background about supplemental rates. They are a temporary rate increase to pre-fund the cost of benefit improvements. The supplemental rates are usually effective September 1st. And if they're not adopted, the increased cost of the plan will be included in the next rate setting valuation for the following biennium. And so if a supplemental rate is not adopted, that said, it's pre-funding it before the next rate setting valuation. So typically you're missing out on about a year of increased contribution rates. So just a quick reminder in case somehow anyone's forgot, you've heard me talk about this bill a lot, but the interruptive military service credit bill expanded who qualified for no cost interruptive military service credit from just being those who had received campaign medals for that service credit to those who received expeditionary medals. And so in front of you, I've got the very small and blurry screenshot from the actuarial fiscal note, and the contribution rate impact is 3 basis points for members, 2 for the employer, and 1 for the state. So here comes the twist Steve teased. The benefit improvement bill that the board endorsed and passed the previous session had a section in it that was amended during the legislative session. So that was not in the original language that came out of the board, but it was amended during session to include a contribution rate freeze for the 21 through 23 and 23 through 25 biennia. That freeze prevents the LEF 2 board from raising contribution rates during that time. And so my understanding of why this was added is that there was concern that the legislature was seeing the fiscal note that this would not cause a contribution rate increase, and they just wanted to be certain that it would absolutely not cause a contribution rate increase. And this was a way for them to ensure that. I didn't say it.
Well, there was also, you remember the bill, it set up a new process working with the actuary's office to convert the benefit improvement account funds into an offset, and how that was all that was something OSA said would take some time. So the freeze was also there to give OSA that time and the board time to work out that offset without feeling like you needed to increase rates as trustees.
So we did go to the board's AG tour to just confirm with him our understanding that this rate freeze would also apply to supplemental rate adoption. And so we did receive that advice. There's tour. We did receive that advice that it would apply to supplemental rate increases also. So slide here on the supplemental rate history. So it's not unprecedented for the board to not adopt a supplemental rate. There 15 times the board has considered supplemental rate increases, and 5 of those you have not adopted the rate increase. So I'm not going to go through each of those, but you can see them on this slide and how much the rate increase would have been. And typically, when I went back and looked at these, the board did not raise them because the board felt that they could absorb through experience and then evaluate at a later date whether rates needed to increase or not. So next steps, normally the process would be for the board to audit the actuarial fiscal note through an outside actuary, and then would be presented options to adopt a supplemental rate at next month's meeting. But due to the benefit improvement rate freeze language, the board cannot do that. And so there's no action for the board to take today. So any questions? I know Tor's there, and then we have an actuary also. Mitch is available if there's any actuarial questions.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mark.
So, just sort of a off the cuff analysis of what would weighting cost the plan, because the sooner you're going to fund the plan, the better off it's going to be, generally speaking. I just wondered what the fiscal impact would be of waiting until the freeze is off. Would it cost? I mean, like a side-by-side comparison, right? It can be more expensive to wait, right? Because we're giving up.
Yeah, and we talked to the actuary's office about that specifically, Mark. And so what they wanted to remind us is that Jacob touched on this earlier. The supplemental rate is only in effect for a temporary period of time. So what you're losing is 6 basis points for a year. That's the total. After that, those 6 basis points are going to get rolled into the ongoing costs of the plan. They won't be affected by the freeze because they're going to be part of they're going to be part of the base contribution rate in the future, not a supplemental. So you're losing those 6 basis points for a year is essentially where you're at.
So I would assume that it's not going to be a real long-term burden on the plan. I mean, apparently there's nothing we can do about it. I'm just wondering how that's going to affect the long-term health of the plan.
No, in fact, that discussion with the actuaries about that actually segued into a discussion of the health of the plan, and the plan is still in very good health. And so you'll have a presentation, the board will have a presentation on that, the health of the plan from the actuary's office in October. They kind of give you a broad overview because that question about the health of the plan could touch on a lot of issues besides this.
Glad Steve handled that. I did not want to do off the cuff math for you of what 6 basis points over a year would equal.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jacob on this issue?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Looks like number 5, Jacob. Looks like, Steve, you want to talk about it real quick? The interim work schedule?
A couple of sort of preliminary remarks before Jacob gets into this. So I have been receiving feedback from a number of board members as they've looked at the interim work plan and the 17 issues that were coming up for discussion. And there were 2 different points that were being made. One is that's a lot, okay, and it can feel overwhelming in 2 different ways. One, and so I'll take those 2 different ways separately. The first one is our job as board, our primary duty is to make sure you have enough information to decide on an issue. However you want to decide, you feel like you've got all the information you need. If on any of these 17 today, you don't feel like you have enough information. If you've got enough information, 100%, yes or no, you're comfortable deciding, fine. If you don't, maybe you're only 85, then we'll bring those back. We'll have an initial presentation like you just had from Jacob on the membership issue. And then you can decide at that time whether you want to move it forward to a comprehensive or not. Yes, if there were 17 initial presentations, that might also seem either overwhelming to staff or overwhelming to you. A lot of these issues, most of these issues are issues that Jacob and we've been working on for some years. And so the initial presentations, I don't want that to affect your decisions. If you decide you want 17 initial presentations or 16 now that one's been done, we can do that. Tim's done them in the past. I've done them in the past. Karen can do them. Sarah can do them. We've got capacity. We've got great people in the office. And Jacob, honestly, I don't want to put him on the spot, but if he had to do 16 of them, he's a machine, and we could work that out over the course of the year. So don't let that concern about the workload affect your decisions. If you want more info, that's what we're here for, and we can do that. The second piece is just sort of how to structure this presentation. Do you want to wait until the end, or do you want to decide each one as they come up? My thinking is, and this is just my thinking is that while they're fresh, as soon as you hear kind of the high level, here's what the issue is, that's probably the best time. And so you kind of pick them off one at a time and then just grind through them, for lack of a better word. And if you're okay with that approach, then I'll turn it over to Jacob and let him get into it.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Jay, sorry.
Well, just one clarifier, Jacob, might be helpful as you go through them. It's just a sense of time, like how, is this an hour-long briefing? Is this a 15-minute topic that might need short discussion? I mean, I think that'll help us sort through if there's 17 of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we fit all this in or not? Is that logical?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And just for transparency, we had our admin meeting this morning, and so Jason's online. We talked about just what Steve had described about kind of going through these issues one by one. We think we're going to have a better product having it in front of us. And then the other piece says that we view this as the opportunity. If we don't want to take action, it's okay. We simply just will move that to a no pile. Doesn't mean it's dead forever. It just doesn't mean during this interim it's going to be worked on. And just gives an answer on some of these issues because we did not want to, I guess, put too much on the team itself. So go ahead.
Okay. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. We're going to start off, we'll get the ball rolling with the actuarial topics, which we knocked out 2 of them already. So won't go through those. I went through these last month for you. So just what's different here is we've added some months in there of when to expect these presentations. So, and then same with the administrative topics. There's no changes from last month other than we've added in what month these are going to take place in. Okay, so here's a look at the 17 topics that we're going to go through. Just wanted to have those displayed, and then Steve handled the other part of what I was going to talk about. So just quickly, or just a reminder of the types of briefings that we do. We do policy briefings or that are on proposing legislation. On those, we do the initial consideration, and then it can move forward to a comprehensive report, and then that can move forward to a final proposal. And the final proposal is where we typically will work with the actuaries to identify the cost, draft language, and then the board will have an opportunity to take a motion to endorse that legislation for the upcoming session. And then we also do educational briefings And those, there's no expected further action by the board. However, sometimes the board does decide after an educational briefing to then move forward with a policy briefing. And sometimes those are provided by an outside source, such as Department of Retirement Systems, usually. So there's just a look. So this really just has the admin and actuary topics. There's one error on there. I've got the budget adoption in July, and that was moved to June. But that does not have in there the policy, but just to give you an idea of kind of what it's going to look like. And in July, right now, also because the board's not going to move forward with the supplemental rate adoption, it's an open month. So there could be a lot of initial reports done next month. Okay, so yeah, firefighter definition, just did that and the board took action, so I'll skip through that one. Overpayment responsibility. So this, I'm going to just talk briefly on these, and if you want more information, just let me know. I know we've talked about some of these a lot over, not just last month, but over the last year or so. So overpayment responsibility, the board moved that to this interim for further discussion last year, and that was because it came out of a separate issue the board was researching on a second survivor window. So there's a bill passed with a survivor, a window to change your survivor option. The board was looking at having another window when there's a recalc done by DRS, and instead decided that that wasn't really the issue, that there was an underlying issue of the member being responsible for paying back overpayments they had received due to an employer error. And so the board wanted a chance to look at that, to gather more data and study that this interim. So this one, the workload that would go into it for board staff would be working with Department of Retirement Systems to get updated data. We had some data a few years back from them, but we'd want to get updated data and do some analysis of that. I imagine it would not be a briefing would not be super long, and that increased data would probably be for the comprehensive, not for the initial briefing. So an initial briefing would probably just be in the 15-minute range, but then a comprehensive could be 30 minutes to present that data and go over that and come up with some options. And then also to be aware of, this one is not just a LEF2 issue. It would impact all plans, and we may need to coordinate with the select committee. It is one where me and Steve have talked to select committee staff on the possibility of coordinating with this, and me and Steve have both presented to the select committee, or we present it, but we have an opportunity to speak with the select committee, and we have mentioned this issue last year, and I think Steve mentioned it last week.
Yes,
So
I should have. Jacob will be doing a presentation to the select committee in July, where he will be letting them know what your interim work plan looks like and what issues might be appropriate for coordination. So I should have mentioned that. That's one of the outcomes from today as well.
Okay. So
Sure, we got a question. Go ahead, Mark.
Do you have you received any feedback from SCPP on that particular issue?
I would say that Senator Conway has shown interest in it. When I talked about it, he asked some follow-up questions about it, but that's it. But Senator Conway is always interested in what the LEF2 board is going, and I usually get questions from him whenever I talk to the committee. Okay, so would the board like to make a motion on this one now, or?
So this one's before us. Is this a yes? We'd like to continue with this through an educational, informational meeting, correct?
Initial.
Sorry, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
initial.
So I would be interested in hearing about that particular one. I think that it seems to me on the face of it to be a little unfair that the employer makes a mistake, then the employee should have to pick up the cost of that mistake.
Is that
That's a motion.
okay, that's right, yeah. Is there a second then?
Second.
Made and seconded to move item number 2 to the, what you call it, initial study. Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Overpayment responsibility number 2 has been adopted to move to the interim.
Okay.
Number 3.
Next one on the agenda is the benefit improvement tiered multiplier date. And so this one came to the board from a letter that you can see displayed there from the Seattle Firefighters and Seattle Police Officers Guild. The issue was whether that there are members who were retired on or before February 1st, 2021, and they're only eligible for the lump sum benefit improvement, not the tiered multiplier benefit improvement. And so my understanding is they had a group of members who were just on the wrong month to have that choice. And so they wanted the board to consider moving that date back. So the possible workload on this would be 3 policy briefings. I would imagine I would work with Department of Retirement Systems to identify how many people it would impact to move it back 1 month or other options, and provide that data to the board. I could provide that data. I think that data would be fairly simple for DRS to get to me, so I could provide that data in an initial briefing if you would like to go that direction with this issue.
Steve, do you have any comments on this? I know you've.
Yeah, the board received a letter just the other day from one of these Seattle firefighters, and he is actually petitioning his case with the Department of Retirement Systems. So his letter to the board kind of echoed the request of the Seattle firefighters in general to study that issue of moving the date from February to January. We heard about this last year, did some preliminary work in terms of, how many members would be affected, and explained to the guy who wrote the letter actually called me as well, and we had a chance to talk. And so they understand that this decision was an intentional decision of the board, that date was not, arbitrary. And that, I think, is about all that I can add to the discussion.
So would the board like to take action to move forward with an initial briefing or put this one on hold?
Mr. Chair, what would be the time commitment just for an initial briefing to get this going?
Well, I think that, and I'm not going to speak for or against, but the concern is that the initial briefing, we would be looking at the request from the requestee, the member.
Yes.
And then I think the concern is the previous month from this request, and then the previous month. And I'm not sure, the time frame, I think at that point becomes lengthy.
Understood.
And I think costly was
That
the
does
other one.
answer the question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think really the big issue, I think the point Steve mentioned was that this date that we had picked was just not just pulled out of the air. I think we looked at this from a lot of different angles, and we wanted to make sure that we had covered, did our due diligence.
Yeah, I should say by way of reminder, because maybe not everybody that's listening was a part of those discussions years ago. Maybe not even all the board members are the same from them. But that date, there was legislation introduced in the 2021 session in the middle of February that was a precursor to the benefit improvement. And as soon as it was released, it created a huge amount of confusion for members and for employers, because members who were thinking about retiring, say in March, were now like, whoa, wait a minute, should I hold off on retiring because I don't want to miss out on this benefit? Some of them had contracts with their employer that they were going to retire on a certain date. Employers were moving forward on hiring people to replace these people, and all of that was thrown into confusion. So one of the ways that that was resolved, for lack of a better word, was that issue will be covered in whatever final bill there is. And the decision by the board was, if you retired before anybody ever knew about that bill, middle of February of 2021, then your decision wasn't affected one way or another by that bill. You went out when you wanted to go out. But after that date, then your decision could have been boogered up one way or affected one way or another by the consideration of a potential benefit improvement. And so by picking that date, that made it whatever you decided, stay in, leave, your decision didn't affect which benefit you got. That unfortunately though did, and then there were some cost issues as well. It's a very expensive benefit. And so, but that was where the break and why that month was picked as the break point. And so that was, if you moved, and this is what I explained to the president of the Seattle firefighters is, if you move it to January, then what happens? Do you hear from the people who are like, well, now I retired in December, so what, that issue would come up, and we could get the data on all of that, and we could get the costs on all of that. I think Jacob said the initial presentation on this particular proposal of moving it back to January would take 15 to 30 minutes because it's got some data in it. But that's about what you're looking at in terms of.
And I would add the data from DRS we could get very quickly, but the actuarial analysis of the cost of that would be more complicated, and we couldn't get till a further presentation.
Mr. Chair, we needed to have that conversation on the record prior to making a decision as to prioritization of this. I think that the decision is becoming pretty clear.
Okay, thank you. Still would need a motion.
So I'm in favor of not moving this one forward to another report. I think the methodology of picking that date was sound and responsible. And I think moving this forward, it's not really in my opinion, it's not a good option for a number of reasons. And I think Steve talked about those things. How many people are going to say, now I was disadvantaged? And I don't really think that this disadvantaged any of our members. I mean, to me, that's the major thing. Everybody might have a different opinion about what they would want to do, but the facts are what they are. The statute was, the language was written responsibly, so I'm not in favor of moving it forward.
I'll second on that.
All right. All right. So we have a motion. Looks like Tor, I think. No, it's not Tor. Okay. So it's not public comment at this point. Okay. That would be not our normal process. Yeah. So I'm not trying to ignore anybody, but we can obviously take it at the end. So before us, we have a motion, and it's been seconded to not take further action on item number 3. Is there other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of not taking action, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Item number 3 has, I don't want to say, no action for number 3.
Okay, next on the list, number 4, benefit improvement retirees reestablishing membership. So this is another benefit improvement issue, the last one that we're going to be discussing today. So this involves a much smaller subset of members. It's members who were retired on or before that February 1st, 2021 date, and then returned to left employment prior to the benefit improvement lump sum payment being made. are not eligible for a tiered multiplier. The bill language was very clear that it is all about your retirement status on that February 1st, 2021 date. If you're retired on or before that date, lump sum only, active on or after that date, you're getting the choice. So, but this was a group of people who, and we're not certain how many. It came to us, I believe, just from one person who was in that situation, that returned to left membership prior to the lump sum payment being made. And why that's significant is it means because they are an active member right now, they have not actually received their lump sum payment. They won't receive that until they've separated from left service. So the question was, should the law be changed to allow them to have that choice between the tiered multiplier and the lump sum in that situation? So this would be 3 policy briefings potentially. The workload for staff would mostly be around, for the initial presentation, would be gathering that data from Department of Retirement Systems and presenting that to the board. See if we can find out more information about any of those specific situations. And so I would imagine that would be kind of in the 15 to 30 minute range for presenting to the board. And if it moved forward, it would be doing the actuarial analysis of the potential cost. So any questions on that one?
Feeling of the group.
Jacob, this is Jason here. As I read this and digest it, as we discussed earlier, the law is fairly clear for an individual as far as what the expectations are and what they can expect to get regarding their retirement date. And then if they choose to come back to work, that seems to be a choice that individual is making with the understanding of what the benefits are that are available. When that person does return to work and they did retire prior to the February 1st date, they're not entitled to that payment, correct? Because they're still working and they're back in the left 2 system, correct?
Yes.
So with that said, I'm not sure. This seems almost to be like a loophole, trying to find a way how to get from the pre-February date to the post-February date. Would I be correct in coming to that conclusion? Or I may just be talking out loud here. I don't know.
No, I'll just speak frankly. That prohibition on that date being clear was intentional again. And part of the reason was, Jason, we didn't want to create a situation, the board didn't want to create a situation where now all these people that had retired are like, well, I want to come back to work. I want to come back to work for a month or 2 so that now I can get this additional benefit. That would have created, again, chaos in the membership and with the employers in terms of how to manage all of that. So the law was clear. Now, as you mentioned, anybody who made that choice knew what they were getting and what they weren't getting. But now that the benefit payment has actually gone out, if you wanted to consider that group who did come back to work, not because they thought it would be a loophole, but just because, like, for instance, the one person we heard of was hired as a chief. So they didn't come back to work anything related to the BIA. Is that disadvantage that they have now that they don't get the lump sum until later than everybody else, and they won't get the multiplier either? Is that enough of a disadvantage that you want to look into it further and help that group out now that we know they weren't coming back trying to take advantage of a loophole, because there was no loophole?
Correct.
It says here, if a member was retired, was this member retired?
Yeah, they had
They're drawing pension?
they retired in January. I'm not even sure if they ended up getting their first pension or not or check before they were rehired, but they did qualify as a retiree. They contacted DRS about whether they were get the tiered multiplier or get the lump sum, and DRS said, no, you only qualify for the lump sum, and you can't get it now because you're working, so you'll get it. You'll get it, you can't get your retirement benefits while you're employed. So that tiered multiplier for her and anybody similar would get, or the lump sum would get paid to them eventually when they separate.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Steve. I think it's just like anybody else that chooses to return to work. You're no longer eligible to draw your retirement, and you're now paying back into LEF 2. And if we were to make a situation where we were going to allow it simply just for the lump sum, my concern would be is does that open a slippery slope where now we get into, what's next? Is somebody going to petition for any other benefit as far as, moving forward on the return to work option?
So was that a motion?
It's kind of just a discussion point.
I know. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we don't advance this one to the next stage as well.
I'll second that again.
The discussion we've had, it's essentially this, structurally, it's the same issue that we've talked about before.
No.
All right. We have a motion and has been seconded to not move number 4 for further action. Discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Right. No further action on number 4 at this time. Number 5.
Okay. So this is one that was added since I presented to the board last month, and this is the lump sum special death benefit. It was brought to the attention to board staff by some members that were impacted by this issue. So there have been some LEF 2 survivors who were denied their LEF 2 lump sum special death benefit because they missed LNI's deadline for application. And so this is a different kind of law, the way it was constructed, in that it is a benefit paid out through the pension system, but the statute puts it in LNI's hands for the determination and states that they, so I'll just read it. The determination of eligibility for the benefit shall be made consistent with, and it cites LNI law, by the Department of LNI. The Department of LNI shall notify the Department of Retirement Systems by order under, and then it cites an RCW. And so even though it is like I said, paid out of the pension system, it the benefit follows LNI law, and that includes the deadlines for application. And so I have those deadlines on the slide there, that it's a 1-year deadline for injury that caused death and 2 years for occupational disease. And then also have how much that benefit is, and that it is adjusted every year with the COLA. And so these were, I think Steve's a little more familiar with the specific situations if you have questions on those situations. But as far as the workload, it would be a possibility of 3 policy briefings. It could potentially impact all the other plans, because the other plans also have lump sum special death benefits, and they have the exact same language as far as LNI making that determination and following LNI law, including the deadlines. Yeah, as far as the time, I think that initial policy briefing would be trying to identify more information about the specific situations, how many people have potentially missed that deadline, if we're even able to get that information. Yeah, so I would imagine it would probably be at least 15 minutes, probably closer to 30 minutes for an initial briefing on that. So if there's any questions.
I have a question. Has this ever come up before? I don't recognize this particular topic. And if it hasn't, is it because nobody has actually missed the deadline? And a related question I would ask is what's the policy issue on having that deadline? Is it just an administrative
Yeah,
piece or is
so-
it more substantial than that?
those are all great questions. Here's what we've been able to learn on this in the last month. There are at least 3 left to surviving spouses who of line of duty, what would be line of duty deaths, who didn't get the line of duty death, the lump sum benefit. The facts are a little bit different in each of them. In one of them, there was, they were fighting with L&I over whether or not the cancer was duty related or not. And after it was determined that it was duty related, the deadline, the 2-year deadline, doesn't start from when L&I made that determination. Apparently, it started earlier, and so the surviving spouse wasn't aware that they only had a very, very, I think, matter of months window to actually apply. Another one, it involved a child and the surviving, the parent, that was their only parent. So the grandparents were not aware of that this benefit even existed until it was too late for them to apply for it. L&I does for administrative, but also for, management. They've got very strict deadlines. They don't want people coming back 10 years later saying, oh, by the way, I had a work-related injury. And by that time, all the witnesses and the records might be hard to find. So they do have very strict deadlines. I won't say they're purely administrative because that's a policy issue as well. DRS, we've been working with DRS over the last month, and they've been very helpful trying to figure out, do we even need a bill? Is this something that could be fixed by rule? DRS is working with their AGs and with the L&I AGs to try to figure out if this is something that could be handled by rule, because the lump sum death benefit itself doesn't have any limit. It's only this L&I determination piece that has sort of come up and unexpectedly provided a limit. We had never heard about this issue until last month, but we did discover in the course of this that, yeah, there were a couple of other left two spouses. As Jacob mentioned, the language is identical in all the other plans. DRS is not aware of anybody being denied in any of the other plans, but they also have no way of tracking or knowing that for sure. So we don't know if there's been a PERS or a TERS or a PCERS or a trooper spouse, for instance, that ran into this same issue.
You tell me if the issue with the first case you described, was that a dispute between the state plan for labor and industries, or was it a self-insured employer?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember whether it was self-insured or not, but we could find out. And that would be, this, as Jacob mentioned, this is a brand new issue. So if you wanted to do an initial presentation on this one, that would be 100% appropriate.
I move that we do.
Amen. Second on that.
Jay, discussion, sorry.
Yeah, I'm good with the motion in a second. I think at a minimum, I'd like to understand more the deadlines post L&I making a decision. To me, that doesn't sound right at all. Even as an employer, it doesn't sound right to me that a clock would start before a decision gets made. The clock should start after a decision gets made and give people time. So I'd like to understand at a minimum that piece more.
Thank you for that. So we do have a motion been seconded to move lump sum special death benefit information, move that on for an initial study. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Number 5 is adopted. All right, Jacob.
Okay. Number 6, taxation of catastrophic disability benefits. Talked to the board about this last month and a little bit last year too. There was some discussion. So DRS had received advice from their tax counsel that a portion of some members' catastrophic disability benefits should be taxed. DRS got this advice when they were implementing a catastrophic disability benefit for PSERS members that passed a couple of years ago. And so DRS made the decision that they would pay the back taxes for Left 2 members, and moving forward would begin withholding taxes from CAT benefits for Left 2 members where required. And so the question for the board was whether there was interest in amending and looking into whether it was possible to amend the catastrophic benefits and how they're calculated so that they would remain not taxable. So this one, it would require advice from tax counsel. So we'd have to reach out to tax counsel to have them weigh in on whether that would be possible, any recommendations they might have. And so an initial briefing this one would be more complicated with that tax advice, although I guess it might not be that complicated if they just tell us, no, it's not possible. So I would imagine kind of in the same, 15 to 30 minutes to do an initial briefing on this issue. I guess I would kick that to Steve. Would you think we would get that advice for the initial briefing, or?
Yeah, the initial briefing probably wouldn't be much more than what Jacob has just said.
Yeah.
So if you decide to move this issue forward, what we would do is start working with DRS and with Ice Miller to see if anything's even possible. If they say yes, then we bring it back to you later in the interim. It's going to take some time, so I would imagine September at the earliest, maybe October, to come back to you with something that would be on the line of a follow-up. And we'd be asking you at that time to kind of consider this your initial briefing, for lack of a better word.
Mr. Chair, we're following a pattern here. People in exigent or high pressure situations or disorganized situations or catastrophic situations are having things happen to them that are totally unexpected and to the detriment of the members out there. We're seeing a trend with a number of these issues today here. This is something else that I think that probably is not going to affect a lot of people out there. The people that it does affect, it affects them rather dramatically. So I make a motion to move this forward.
All right.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to move number 6 forward for further study. Discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you explain why part of that catastrophic disability is taxable? According to.
Okay, it's complicated, but the general rule is if your benefit is not based on service credit and it's not based on your age, then it's not taxable, the disability benefit. The catastrophic benefit specifically is 70% of your final average salary. Doesn't matter how much service credit you had, doesn't matter your age. You just have to be catastrophically disabled. The belief of the board when that bill was passed and the belief of DRS when it was passed is that, and I believe the advice we got from Ice Miller, in all fairness, back then, was also that's not taxable. And it's been treated as non-taxable ever since. The catastrophic, though, also has some offsets. So you get L&I benefits, which may or may not be taxable. You get Social Security disability benefits, which may or may not be taxable. And you can't have above 100% of your AFC with all of those combined. It is something about the combination of those offsets is what Ice Miller relied on in saying that, no, a bigger portion of their benefit is taxable than you've been treating as taxable. Now, so the question is, could we reorder those offsets? Is there something in state law that could be done without increasing the benefit? The answer is, my it's probably no, but we did want to, bring it to your attention and kind of, follow up on that is what we would do to, find out if there is anything. If there's nothing that you can do, then there's nothing that you can do.
And I would just add, I think the key part was what Steve said about without increasing the benefit. Because I mean, I think sure you could redo this benefit to be tax free, but without increasing it is where it gets complicated.
Other comments? Seeing none, so number 6 is before us. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Number 6 is adopted. Thank you.
Okay.
Number 7, please.
So DRS administrative fees and unfunded actuarial liability charges to members. So in certain limited optional service credit purchases, members are charged the DRS administrative fee and the unfunded actuarial liability costs, which are typically the responsibility of the employer. This one would impact all plans, and in fact, it would impact other plans more than LEF2 because LEF2 does not currently have a unfunded actuarial liability. And so it would be 3 policy briefings. And yeah, the initial one I would expect to be pretty short at the 15, 30 minutes. And then it would be working with the actuaries to identify the cost would be the more complicated part of looking into this issue. So any questions on that one?
Did I understand you say this does not affect us right now?
Legally it does, but as a practical matter, it doesn't, because what happens now is all employers, all say PERS 2 employers, the left board as an employer, we not only pay our contributions for all the employees, but for each employee, we also pay as the employer a portion of the PERS 1 unfunded liability, and that's part of the employer rate. And so in those rare circumstances where the member is required to pay the employer contributions, they get charged that PERS 1 unfunded liability rate, they get charged the DRS admin rate, and those historically, those are the kind of things that members were specifically excluded from the UAAL charges when those were first created. But as a practical matter, LEF1 has been in a positive funded status, and there have been no contributions required for LEF1 since 2000. So the only kind of possibility of this even applying to LEF2 would be some new employer coming into the system, like maybe say, I can't even imagine who it would be because membership's mandatory, but and somebody purchasing service credit prior to the year 2000. So for LEF2, it seems like it would be extraordinary. This is going to be much more common in the PERS situations. It did come to our attention by a LEF2 retiree who retired and then went to work in a PERS job and got billed PERS contributions, and that's why they were wondering why their bill was what some of these portions of the bill were. But it really affected the PERS contributions, not LEF.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Senator, I'm curious, Jason, is there any statutory authority that you could find allowing DRS to offset unfunded actuarial liability with Plan 1 systems by contributions from Plan 2 members?
It's not an issue I've looked into that deeply yet. So that would be something we could look into at the initial briefing. And I'm not sure if Steve looked into it that much, but yeah, I have not.
No, that's where we worked with DRS on this issue last interim. But yeah, the statute requires that the member pay the employer contributions, and that's all it says. that term contributions has been defined by DRS to include all of the charges to employers, including the admin charge, the UAL charge, and the the payment, the portion of the contributions to pay for benefits. So there's nothing much more specific than that. Right. But again, for left two, it's more of a hypothetical issue than a real issue, if you will.
Mr. Chair, this is Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Yeah, make a motion to leave this off of our agenda and move forward based on our discussions.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move forward without adopting number 7. Further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Number 7 won't move forward, so caught myself.
Okay, number 8. DRS appeal deadlines. So some left two members have missed the deadline to file an administrative appeal with DRS. The deadline to file an appeal, and so some of the reasons the members have cited that is that there is a different appeal deadline for what DRS calls their petition process versus their appeal process. The appeal process is governed by the Administrative Procedures Act. I should add that there is a minimum requirement for that deadline in the APA, and DRS goes further than that with their deadline. But there is that difference that members have cited in confusion. And then the other issue that members have brought to our attention is that they have said that they were asked by DRS to gather additional information to help respond for DRS to make a decision on that administrative decision, that appeal. But the members did not get additional time to gather those records, and there was confusion where they thought they were being given more time. And you could especially see that potentially being an issue if there's medical records that need to be gathered or things that are going to take some time to gather. So they felt there was a lack of clarity on DRS's part. And so the question was whether there should be that deadline should be extended, or there should be a tolling requirement that if they're asked to gather more information that the deadline toll. And currently in the APA, there's no requirement for those things. But that wouldn't prevent an agency from allowing that to occur. So there would be, this also would potentially impact all plans. The deadlines, the appeals process, the petitions process are the same across all of the plans and systems. So possible select committee coordination on this one too. And it would be 3 policy briefings. Initial one could be done pretty quickly, and probably more of a 15 minutes to do an initial briefing on this one.
Yes, sir.
I just want to comment. I think Senator Holig made this comment earlier. It just seems like a lot of these that are on our work plan right now are really around deadlines and other issues that are getting in the way of some members receiving some benefits. And to me, it just sounds like there's an overall need for some more communication around some of these things. And so for my interest in leaving this one on, and as I look forward even to number 9, it's a similar issue, is just to leave them on so the board can understand more. Is there more that can be done in terms of how we communicate these things? I mean, deadlines are important. It's hard when people miss deadlines, and we have to have them. But a lot of these are really around that issue, and I'd really like to understand that more.
Yeah, this was one that we were working with DRS on last interim as well. We had a couple of members, you have a 60-day deadline to appeal a petition denial. And then but then they also got a letter saying, if you have additional information, please provide it. And they said, well, I do have additional information. And they're like, okay, DRS, well, you have 90 days to provide that additional information. And they did within the 90 days. But then it was like, well, thank you for the additional information, but you missed your 60-day appeal deadline, so your case is dismissed. And that we talked with them about that. That's in their WAC. We felt like that was something that could be fixed in WAC, but because it had already now been a part of two different pieces of litigation. They were reluctant to do any changes to the WAC that would negatively affect their position in these litigation proceedings. So, and as Jacob mentioned, that we don't even know how many, if there are other members in other plans.
Yeah, and so if I did an initial briefing, that's something I could try to focus in on with some of these that, you know, you're both commenting on, where there is potentially, you know, what is the communication process with Department of Retirement Systems? How do they notify people of, and with L&I, with that other benefit, how are they notifying people? What is the process there?
Mr. Chair, this is Jason.
Hi, Jason.
I have a motion and a question. I'd like to start with the question first for Jacob. So as Steve mentioned, this is in WAC, but clearly they're having some challenges trying to move forward and, in my opinion, do the right thing. And for us to get involved in this as the Left 2 board, are we talking like legislation to change the WAC or creating another piece of legislation? Can you bring some light to that, Jacob?
Yeah, I think potentially legislation. This language was pulled from a bill that was introduced in the Senate last session. But I think it's also possible that as we go through the briefings and look at the communication process that DRS currently has for notifying members of these deadlines, I could see there being opportunity to continue to work with DRS and see if we can resolve these issues, something simpler than legislation.
Thank you, Jacob. Mr. Chair, I make a motion to carry this forward so we can get more information to bring light to this, to rectify it, whether that's just communicating with DRS or if it requires legislation.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to move number 8 further for initial studies. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, number 8's adopted. Number 9.
Okay, number 9, survivor re-election window. I mentioned this one briefly in a prior one we talked about, but this one has to do with members who requested to change their survivor option between the effective date of the board endorsed bill and DRS receiving IRS approval for this new law. Those members were not allowed to because they missed the deadline. Once again, a deadline. And so, yeah, this one, just to remind you, the board's initial bill language did not have seeking IRS approval, but the Department of Retirement Systems had received advice from their tax counsel. I believe their initial advice was that the IRS would not allow this change, would not allow a survivor to have a window to change. And so a compromise was reached to add this additional language that DRS would have to receive IRS approval before the bill could be implemented. And so there was one person, they were a PERS member, not a Left 2 member, who after session wanted to utilize that window and change the survivor option. They weren't able to, and then their time frame to do so passed before DRS received that IRS approval. And so what this issue would look at would be whether to endorse legislation that would allow people in that situation after the effective date of the bill, but before IRS approval, to have the ability to change their survivor option. And like I said, we're only aware of one person, and they were a PERS member. So it would be 3 policy briefings. There would be an opportunity to work with the select committee since it's a PERS member. I think it would be, pretty short briefings on that issue. Although there would likely need to be tax advice from ICE Miller again about whether this would be allowed or not, since so much time has passed. And that was a concern raised previously. It would be allowing time to pass after retirement and then allowing someone to make a change to their survivor option, whether the IRS would allow that or not. So any questions on this issue?
So let's make sure I understand. We don't have a left two, I guess,
No.
nexus. No issue right now.
Yeah,
And then,
I was just saying, it came to the left two board. I believe the issue was the PERS member brought it to our attention because it was originally a left two
Right.
endorsed bill.
right. And then is this would be, is SCPP taking this on then?
We don't know. And when we first learned about it, we weren't sure how many members would fall into this. And we thought maybe one of the people that had contacted us was a left two retiree. But as we worked on it more with DRS, we determined there's really only one person that could be covered by this, and they are a PERS retiree.
All right. Number 9 is before us. Action or no action?
Mr. Chair, this is Jason. I'll make a motion for no action.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for no action. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just gonna say that it's a left two board and it doesn't impact any left two members. So there are other avenues for, represented, non-represented people to advocate for their issues. I just don't think there's a connection between that and what we do for left two members.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of taking no action, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, no further action on number 9 at this time.
Okay, number 10.
Okay.
So I'm going to hand off the next 3 to Steve, actually, because these are ones that, because I need a break, but also, no, these are ones that Steve has been, he's much more knowledgeable than me about. So.
Okay, so this one and the next one have quite a bit of overlap. Typically, when there is some administrative interpretation that affects a member's benefit, you will see that in WAC. Recently, we were contacted by left two members about some salary questions that they were having with their employer and that their employer was having with DRS. And we found a couple of examples, and this is the first, of something that was not covered in WAC. It was covered in what's called a DRS employer notice. And the employer notice tells employers how to report certain compensation as salary or not. But it's not in WAC. It's not on in the member handbook. So it's not something that members may even be aware of. This one is employers and their locals oftentimes have bargained now where if you're a member and you have disability insurance, so I get disabled, I get an insurance payment. It's separate from L&I maybe if it's a work-related disability, but in particular, non-duty. A lot of employers have bargained with their members so that they will turn over those checks. I get a disability insurance payment, but I'll turn it over to my employer. And as a result, the employer won't make me use leave for that time period. That kind of came out of a way of managing a situation that comes up, because if you don't have that, what can end up happening is a person, especially say they're towards the end of their career, they've got a lot of leave built up. They're only going to get cashed out at 1/4 of the value of that leave. But if they go out on disability, now they can use the leave at full pay and get their insurance payments on top of that. So there was sort of the system could create an incentive for somebody to, want to be disabled. Now, obviously, if they're really disabled, but anyway, so you'd have these questions, and this was just a way to level the playing field. Then they're not going to. There's no way to game the system, for lack of a better word, to get more than your salary. Um, For duty disability, DRS says, yeah, when that happens, that annual leave, that sick leave that you've used is salary. And actually, any annual leave and sick leave that you use is treated in salary for every purpose, except one, and that has to do with non-duty disability insurance. So the DRS employer notice for non-duty disability insurance is different from the one for duty disability insurance. Non-duty disability insurance, if you use your leave and then you turn over your check and you get your leave back, DRS instructs the employer to back out that leave. And so you don't get it. It's not usable in that circumstance. That's the only circumstance where a person can use their leave and have it not be considered salary. Again, this was new. I worked with DRS on this issue when it first came up regarding duty disability years ago. And the thinking at that time was this DRS, you only get to count compensation for services rendered. You earn your leave for your service, so usually cashing out using your leave is considered services rendered. But in this instance, they felt like you were buying back your leave, and so this wasn't leave for services. This was purchased leave, for lack of a better word, and therefore it shouldn't be considered the same as any other leave. On the duty disability issue back in the day, I argued with them, well, technically this leave was earned. It was accrued for services and it was used just like any other. Now, if you want to argue that they purchased some leave and now they've got purchased leave on the books, and the next time they used that purchased leave, you might have a technical issue, but do you really want to go down that path? Back then, apparently I was more persuasive 4 years ago. They felt like, no, that doesn't make sense. And so they treated it as, but they never changed the notice for non-duty. And then when it came up for non-duty, so this could be resolved with a WAC change. We actually started with the idea of saying you really need to take a couple of these issues and get them out of employer notices altogether and put them into WAC. And then at the time you're putting them into WAC where members have an opportunity to comment on WACs, provide public input on WACs. That was where these issues started. That was where we started with DRS, is you really need to WACify these, not just have them in employer notice where there's no public input, maybe not even any public awareness. So that's where that's what this issue is. It's highly technical, but it definitely is applying to some left bargaining units who brought it to my attention.
So item 10. Yes, sir.
I guess more of a question to make sure I'm tracking, because I appreciate the answer, Steve, but I'm not aware in my city of a lot of situations where people that are on disability are then turning over their checks to get their leave credited back, because I think they understand that impact. And if they've taken the leave as a sick leave day, then it is considered part of their basic salary. So I don't know how big an issue this is. I understand, I'm a mid-sized city and maybe larger cities see more of this than what I do, but I'm just trying to figure out how large an issue is this?
Yeah, we could bring that back to you. One of the things I've become aware of, because, I've been in PERS my entire career, but I've been working for the Left Board now for 20 years, and I was the legal services manager at DRS dealing with some of these issues for 5 years before that. There are there's a lot of uniqueness in LEF compared to other systems in PERS. So my understanding, particularly with the bargaining for disability leave, that those insurance checks be turned over, that is almost universal in the LEF community.
Mhm.
The non-duty disability, I don't know.
Yeah.
How many of them out there have bargained for the exact same thing for their non-duty insurance as they have for their duty insurance in LNI.
Well, I'd move to keep this on the list so we can continue the discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and second to keep number 10 on the list. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Number 10 stays on. Number 11, you kind of covered that a little bit too, Steve, right?
Yeah, high level, holiday pay is always considered overtime, except in one very limited circumstance in which there's a DRS employer notice, but not a WAC, that provides that holiday pay where the employer, and I always get it backwards, whether they track or don't track, whether you actually work on the holiday or not, that is or isn't. So it's considered overtime, it's considered salary in every instance except one, and that one is in an employer notice. So again, this was when we talked with DRS about WACifying and
I'd move to keep this one on the list.
All right, is there a second?
A second. Mr. Chair, just a comment here to follow the second. There's a pattern today here, and the pattern has to do with notice requirements, notice being provided, lack of notice, people being unaware of what's available, when to respond, the inconsistencies out there. Steve, you made a couple of different comments, a number of them along the way. You keep saying you need to have these things established in WAC, so they're not just some floating policy out there that they provide just to a limited group on that. Potentially, and I'm going to vote for this, potentially we need to address something that is by legislation possibly, and entertain this later, not now. Anything that is a rule out there for X amount of period of time and have some criteria out there, it needs to be established in WAC to continue to be enforced. I mean, there's some notice requirement we need to establish as a standard out there that obviously through this whole list of 11 so far here is the common denominator out there for all the problems.
Further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving number 11 forward, say aye.
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 Opposed? 11 moves forward. Thank you. Item number 12.
this one is partly a carryover of a long-term issue, but also a new approach. So we had a Left 2 member who went out for PTSD. And this was before PTSD was statutorily considered duty-related. LNI at the time had said, well, if it was the right PTSD case, we'd probably approve it. But his was not. So, if you had a single event PTSD, the LNI would consider that more in the nature of an injury and could approve it. But if you had PTSD as a result of multiple exposures, that they would not. They considered that an occupational illness, and that was not approved until statute was changed. So we had one member who went out on a non-duty disability, and this, at least one, this would then allow them, if they were able to go in and establish today that they met the criteria for what is now considered a duty-related disability, that their benefit could just be converted from non-duty to duty. It was non-duty at the time, statutorily, but if you had the exact same incident today, it would be considered duty. So that would be the in a nutshell, that's the issue. Still require all the same proof, all of the same application process that any other applicant would require.
Action? No action? Are we aware of, this is a, I know you mentioned the one person,
There's-
PTSD,
Yeah, there's one for sure.
and then you and I had talked about
Would it apply to cancers or not?
the other presumptive diseases, strokes, things like that, a change or whatever.
There were, so some of them, like say most of the cancers, even if they weren't presumptive,
Right.
you could take it up and potentially prove that it was still duty related, and there were plenty of cases where that happened. Similarly, even if it was presumptive, it could be challenged and it might be determined that you didn't meet the criteria, maybe because you were smoking or something else that rebutted the presumption. Multiple exposure PTSD, that was black and white though. That was, you didn't matter whether you had proved it or not, whether it was work related or not, it was not covered until the law changed. There may be some other of the respiratory things as well where there was a black and white. Don't know though how many people may have gone out on a non-duty disability with those types of conditions, but it would allow them, if they did, to sort of bring those forward now.
Senator Holy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just sitting here reminiscing a bit. Mark's an OG. Been here since the beginning, but I've been here 18 years. I think I was the first replacement on the board. The funny part is that this is reminiscent, although it affects a couple people, it affects them rather dramatically. And the first 5 to 10 years on the board, the improvements we made were hypothetical for people that were going to be in this situation or could help, a very small group of people out there, but with very dramatic consequences. And I think this flows on the theme. We're continuing our original mission is making sure that nobody's left behind on this. I'm going to move this forward.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and second and move number 12 forward. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Number 12 moves forward. Thank you. Number 13.
Okay, thanks for the break, Steve. COLA inflation. I did provide a educational briefing last year to the board on this issue with the inflation increasing and the board receiving, and I'm sure board members also receiving lots of questions about that. The issue in front of the board is whether, the retirees have expressed concern that the 3% maximum COLA for LEF 2 does not meet the recent level of inflation. As a reminder, what LEF 2 and the other Plan 2s use for COLA is COLA banking. So in years where the CPI increases more than the 3% maximum, that amount over 3% is banked for use in future years where it's below 3%. But we have continued to receive questions about this. Once again, this would impact, like I said, this is universal for the Plan 2s and Plan 3s. And so it would impact the other plans and may need coordination with the Select Committee. We have talked to Select Committee staff about this and mentioned it to the Select Committee. However, I'm not sure that there's a strong interest with the Select Committee, and Steve can weigh in this, but that the Select Committee, for anyone who's tuned in, if any of you are tuning into the Select Committee, the whole time I've worked in pensions, there are constantly, they are dealing with the Plan 1s, obviously not LEF 1, but the other Plan 1s not having a COLA at all, or very little, in very limited circumstances having a COLA, so they are constantly dealing with requests to give Plan 1 members a COLA. So not sure how much interest there would be in giving the Plan 2 members a larger COLA, a potentially larger COLA at this time, while they still deal with trying to deal with the Plan 1s not having a COLA. Yeah, so the possible workload for us would be potentially 3 policy briefings, be working with the actuaries in determining the cost of increasing that COLA, of paying something more than the 3%. Not sure how much work that would take. Probably have to be a few months out because of we would be working heavily with the actuaries on providing you meaningful information about any policy ideas on this issue. So any questions?
Questions? Go ahead.
No, I don't have a question. I have an opinion.
When has that ever stopped you? Go ahead, my friend.
I think that the current COLA situation for Level 2 employees is pretty good and progressive. And when you look at other public safety plans in the country, there are a lot of them that don't have an automatic COLA. Some of them have ad hoc COLAs where every time it happens, the legislature has to pass a new statute in those other states. And I think the banking feature, I don't mind the inflation piece because you're going to recover that money through the banking feature. I think is very progressive, and it's at the top tier of what public employees and public safety employees in particular have. So I don't see the need to move forward with that. That's my opinion. My motion is not to move this forward.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'll second that so I can speak to it.
Sure.
Steve, I guess the question is directed towards you. My first impression on this is Marcus is spot on this. If we do change that 3%, that's more than just a simple, change in percentage of inflation that's allowed or a COLA that's allowed. That completely upsets the funding status. I mean, of the whole trust fund, I believe. Can you address that?
There would be a cost, and that's the piece, Jacob. We'd have to work with the actuary's office on that. And all of the Plan 2 systems have the exact same COLA, 3% capped with the banking feature, except for the Plan PERS 1 and TERS 1, which have no COLA. And that, the way it's been expressed to me is, that's taking up all of the air in the room right now. The resolution of the Plan 1 COLA issue, while legislators while people are not unsympathetic to the fact that because of the recent spike in inflation, left to retirees, all Plan 2 retirees are, losing ground. The priority right now is figuring out the Plan 1s where they've been losing ground for 15 years since the COLAs were repealed back in 2008 or 2009. So that until that Plan 1 COLA issue is resolved, it would be very difficult to get any legislative traction on this issue.
Yeah.
It's at least my opinion.
Good call.
Other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor of not supporting moving number 13 forward, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, number 13 is on hold. Item 14.
Okay, 14, drop update. So a deferred retirement option plan known as a drop allows an employee who's eligible to retiree to start earning their pension while the employer retains the employee's services. Instead of continuing to add new years of service, thereby increasing the employee's pension benefit amount, the employer begins placing their retirement checks into an account that will earn some level of interest. It varies depending on the plan. On the state, on the city, on the county that has a drop plan. And then when the employee retires, they receive the full value of that account in addition to their pension benefits. So, or beginning to receive their pension benefits. This was brought to the board, or a request to look into creating a drop plan was brought to the board by the Fraternal Order of Police. The board has studied this issue before, back in 2006. So the possible workload on this one would be an educational briefing to update that 2006 educational briefing. And And then there could potentially be, there's been changes since 2006 to federal tax law regarding a drop plan. And so part of that would require a potentially significant amount of ICE Miller work, or whichever tax council of their work on this, and cost to the board. So the board could do an educational briefing and then choose to request funds from the legislature for ICE Miller, to work with ICE Miller on studying this further and looking at the new federal requirements and designing a potential drop plan. So any questions on that?
Questions, direction?
Mark, you have something to say?
Doing all the talking today. I don't want to stop anybody else from.
Anybody else got anything?
As Jason, I make a motion to leave this off of our agenda, move forward.
Second. Yeah.
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded to not move forward with number 14. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
14 is on hold.
Okay.
Number 15, part-time left members.
Thank you. So the issue here is that law enforcement agencies adopting flexible work policies may help address hiring and retention issues in law enforcement. However, part-time law enforcement officers are not eligible for membership in LEF 2. And so this issue came from a bill that was proposed last session on flexible work for law enforcement officers. It was a large, complex bill, and just one small section of it made a change to the LEF 2 statutes. The bill did not pass, but it would have made a change, and it would have allowed for part-time law enforcement officers to be able to earn, to be eligible for membership in LEF 2. So they would have been able to, typically, if you are, not typically, but LEF 2 always requires that you be full-time, fully compensated, and that would have changed this practice to allow for part-time positions to be eligible for LEF 2. So it would have included firefighters as well as law enforcement officers. The workload on this would be potentially 3 policy briefings. Like I said, the bill itself was much more complex than just a pension issue. It was dealt with more employment, human resources type of concerns, looking for, there was a lot of testimony on the hearings the bill received from employers, some employers and members trying to come up with some creative ways to improve recruitment and retention in law enforcement, which has been an ongoing issue in recent sessions. So any questions on that issue?
Senator.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Jason, this Senator Lovick's bill, I was number 2, and you should have seen the original version on this here that I actually had him adjust to hit some sort of a, I don't know, a balance of reasonableness here to come up with a solution. I just give you a mindset why this is something maybe we want to look into a little bit. And I understand the consequences of this, has a ripple effect far outside of just our world here with police officers. We have had an absolute crisis in recruiting police officers, in the last 5 years here, last 4 years here. We had certain members that took a rather interesting approach to limiting law enforcement abilities, to creating new areas of law enforcement oversight that appeared to be a little bit disengaged and possibly, politically leveraged. That became distasteful is kind of a tough word, but it's maybe a curb or something that would not attract people to the profession, or would prevent them from taking into consideration, being a cop, period. So the agencies out there have had a policy, and outside the state, for example, to recruit in, but also it's a cannibalization process here between different agencies, who can pay more, who can offer a better position, this kind of a thing. And even outside the state to do that, to recruit through lateral academies, for example. You add to the mix real briefly here the fact that all of a sudden now State Patrol is even more of a crisis in staffing than regular police officers are. So they've established a lateral academy. We have for years poached law enforcement officers from the state to bring them to local departments, county and city departments. This is something that's a direct request. Because when I asked them in committee, I'm on the Law and Justice Committee, when I asked specifically, was at the time, I asked specifically, or I'm sorry, Transportation Committee, asked specifically the Chief of the State Patrol. And I said, if we gave you more money for academies, would you be able to fill them? And I had to ask him 2 or 3 times to get him to actually follow the question. Finally, he said no. So he's telling me that actually they don't even have the bandwidth with the backlog there to fill the academies they have. So the lateral academy for them allows them to compete on an even basis and poach from other departments. The point is this whole process is cannibalization. On the back end out here, we've done some great stuff with the benefits improvement account, and that years 15 to 25 people might bail early, retire early. Are going to stick around just because all of a sudden we've created an incentive to do so, more so than existed before. And there's other options out there that I go down a rabbit hole with about, investing, post 20 years in a left retirement versus, leaving and going someplace else, investing 100%, in a brand new, in a PERS or TERS retirement system out there. It's something that the math actually starts to pencil out, sticking around. Still on the front end, we're having a problem, filling the positions, filling the seats on that, filling the academies. There's a backlog for local and county seats available in academies now. So we tried to expand that a little bit to allow that backlog to ameliorate, but we just don't have the people to fill the seats. What do you do if that's the option available to you and it's not happening? You try and keep people here a little bit longer to fill the positions that are necessary out there, that people are leaving or have left early due to some of the policy changes in the last 5 years here, to stick around longer and fill the positions. Possibly if we had a part-time, I'm telling you about the intent, the mentality of this. I'm not saying whether this is ripe, for playtime right now. But, possibly what we can do is we can slow down the attrition rate on the back and the retirement rate and have people stick around just a little bit longer, maybe allowing the front end to backfill a little bit and stop the absolute bleeding when it comes to the loss of institutional memory, professional expertise, the knowledge base out there for law enforcement. When Mark, I say this, totally sincerely, when you have conversations with police officers out there, I swear 1 out of every 5 conversations, somebody says, I should have been a fireman. I mean, it just the mindset, the brotherhood, everything you have. You don't seem to have problems recruiting out there. Everybody's happy to see, firemen come. I mean, you're solving problems. 40 years ago, it was that way with police officers too. It's so dramatically different. This is something that's probably not, 20 years ago was not a great idea. It was something that would have been considered, contrary to what their intent was. Now I think it's just coming down to necessity at this point that we need to follow through with this. So I'll make the motion that we go ahead and follow up on this.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move number 15 forward for further action. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 15 moves forward. Number 16.
Secure Act 2.0. So talked about this last month, but it was a federal law that was just signed into law last year. It's a very large and complex law. DRS is currently working on implementing 8 of the mandatory sections of the bill. They have different time frames for when those need to be implemented. They've assigned mostly one project team to that. There is one of the sections being handled as part of the it involves Roth and is being handled as part of the Roth implementation that they're working on separately. And so the possible workload on this would be an educational briefing most likely done. I know we've talked to DRS about it. I don't know if we've got confirmation that they've agreed to do the briefing or not, but I think that's what we would work towards is either asking DRS to do it or do it jointly with Left 2 board staff.
Good, Jay.
I move to keep this one on the list.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to keep 16 on the list moving forward. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 16 moves. Number 17, and the last one. I see you smiling.
I think this is my personal record. Maybe not. I don't know. I've had some long ones. Benefit improvement, but okay. Benchmarking peer comparison update. So the board requested an update to the peer comparison, and this was during last year's strategic planning meeting. The board last received a benchmarking update in 2017 based on 2016 data. And so the possible workload on this, it would be a more substantial briefing than the other ones I've discussed. I'm guessing at least 30 minutes, probably around 45 minutes to go over some of the data from our peers. I believe me and Steve have talked about potentially doing this during the October. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's the idea is this one will take a lot of work, but the idea would be including it as part of your strategic planning discussion in October.
Good. I just have a question because we have a lot of stuff on the table for the staff. And I'm wondering how it would impact your workload.
We won't be, historically, the board doesn't talk about policy items at the October. So covering the initials on the policy, we'll have a follow-up tomorrow. We'll be able to manage it. Like I said at the beginning, don't let our workload concerns unduly affect your yes or no. If there was a workload concern, we will already have passed it by 0.17. So no, this would be fine if you wanted us to. We're just trying to actually get some guidance about things that you want for October. And if this is one of the ones you want for October, then we'll do it.
And I would add, one of the things I believe that was discussed last year was about the benefit improvement passing and just how that impacts us. So we could kind of focus it on that.
Mr. Chair, this is Jason. I make a motion to move it forward for October.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to move number 17 forward to our October meeting. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 17 is adopted. Nice work, Jacob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks.
Looks like we had 12 is what I counted. 12 of the 17 moving forward.
Yes, and now I don't want to make a liar out of Jacob, so I'll be the one. DRS is doing a presentation to the select committee in July regarding seeking improvements or changes to public records privacy laws. And they offered to do the same presentation to the Left 2 board at your July meeting if you would like to hear about that. And that'll be a DRS presentation, so it won't affect our workload.
I think that would be helpful. I know that we've had some questions raised about how information is shared and the request for information that goes to DRS on a regular basis. And so I think that's a good one.
That would take a motion.
So moved.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. Discussion? You're seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're doing a handoff here between Jacob and Karen. I'll just give you some brief background. The biennial operating budget for the state included some compensation changes related to board employees that require board approval. And so as part of your budget approval, Karen's going to talk about that and the budget in general. And with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
Good morning. It is still morning. Chair Lawson, members of the board, for the record, Karen Durant, staff to the board. By way of background, the agency is funded from the LEF Plan 2 expense account, which was created in statute. The fund itself is not subject to appropriation through the legislature, but the expenditures are subject to review and approval by OFM. The board originally saw a draft for 23-25 spending plan at your July 2022 meeting where you moved to adopt. In general, the expenditures necessary do some general categories for board meetings, member stakeholder communication and outreach, professional development and training, contracts for services, and our general agency operations. During the 2023 session, to kind of get to more what Steve introduced at the beginning, additional funding was provided for an agency submitted decision package for an independent IT security audit. Originally, we had IT security audit provided through the State Investment Board. Because we now operate independently in our own location without co-location, we need to do our own. So we were funded for that. The legislature have general wage increases of 4% and 3% effective July 1st of each year. Lump sum incentives for employee retention and COVID vaccine booster, $1,000 each with qualifications. And then additional funding for central service rate changes, which are funds like Department of Enterprise Services, Office of Financial Management, and WATEC. Just for interest, I have the numbers shown in very broad categories of what you adopted in July of 2022 and then what's before you today. As we just discussed in the last slide, the general categories of increase per the legislature, basically salary and wages, and the IT audit. So in pointing this out for the board's adoption and consideration, I want to make it clear that this spending plan assumes the provision of the 4% and the 3% general wage increases for all staff members and the executive director, also assumes the incentives of $1,000 for qualifying staff members and the executive director. So if you approve this spending plan, it approves those for action as well. Your options for today are to adopt the presented expenditure spending plan or don't adopt. If you want to see that again, there we go. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Can you just on the staff and trustee professional development, it's not significant, but did go down by 11,000. Am I reading that right? What is forecast classes or what? Something changed there, obviously.
We're still kind of adjusting to a post-COVID training cycle, and so we're trying to dial that in as much as possible. This is a plan. Obviously, they go into what's called an allotment at OFM, and every month and every quarter they monitor that for variance and that kind of thing. So we've been typically underspending in that category, but we can move things around within categories.
I just know that we have always had an emphasis on making sure everybody's highly trained and educated.
Still an emphasis, indeed. It incorporates that.
Other questions? And just to make sure, so it's everybody, including yourself, on this package.
If you adopt. Yes, if you adopted, it would include me.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Jason.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adopt the presented expenditure spending plan. Comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, it's adopted. Karen, I want to thank you for your brief presentation.
Like it concise.
Yes. Jacob, yeah, I'm just going to point it out. I'm kidding. I'm teasing you.
Thank you, Karen.
All right.
All right, now that, now that we're on track, I will make sure that I don't get us off track, Mr. Chair. So for the administrative update briefly, Jacob and Tammy were at the recent State Council of Firefighters Annual Convention at the table answering questions and assisting members. Don't have any outreach scheduled for before the next meeting. Jesse is going to be contacting all of you about scheduling our one-on-one expectation interviews. This, again, this kind of gets a little bit confused every year because the timing would overlap, so we're splitting up the timing. This is separate from my evaluation. Okay, but this, if you've got something to say to me about my evaluation, you sure can. But it's more about meeting with you to find out what your expectations are from all of us, including me. How we're doing, what could we do differently, what could we do better? That's the purpose of these expectation interviews. Jesse's going to start setting those up. And so just a heads up, those will be coming out to you, and there's a online SurveyMonkey tool that goes along with that too, that you can fill out ahead of time to help inform those discussions. These are ones where I go and meet with you wherever you're at. So I drive to Spokane and meet with you in person if that's where you're at, because we get much better feedback that way. But again, it's you. And so if that is not what you want, the world has changed a little bit from COVID. And if you are uncomfortable with those kind of face-to-face meetings, then we can do it remotely. But the preference from our perspective, we felt like the in-person meetings, and we can do it for coffee, we can do it for lunch, whatever works for you. We can do it in your office, whatever. But just, when you're on your own turf, you feel more comfortable sharing. And so that's the idea, is going to your place and hearing what's on your mind. There is we do have a birthday to celebrate. So the final thing I wanted to mention in my administrative update is a little bit of history. Many of you may remember the Left 2 board was actually created by a state initiative to the people, and the people voted for that initiative in November, but the board actually became effective the following July. So July 1st, 20 years ago, marks the official creation of the Left 2 board. So it's a couple days early, but we wanted to mention the 20th birthday of the board, and we have one board member who was there at the very beginning. I attended the first meeting in July as an audience member because I was working for DRS at the time. Mark Johnston was there from the beginning. And Mark, we have something for you, Dennis, if you want to give it to him.
Steve, you can.
Well, this police and fire have a tradition of what they call challenge coins, and they're coins that identify the organization that they belong to. They share those challenge coins with people that they kind of offer to join their brotherhood, for lack. So we have a special extremely limited challenge coin for original left to board members.
And if I may, just on the very front of the coin, and it's well done in red, and it says Left Plan to Retirement Board, on the back it says they keep us safe, we keep them secure, and it's the original board member. And so, and I'll say on behalf of the membership, thank you. I mean, I don't know how many people actually know, but Mark was, I'll say, the driving force.
I was going to share a story actually, and I can do it in 4 minutes to make sure we're not late.
Okay, well, let me hand it.
Yes.
Like, so I can sit down.
So
Well, I was going to say, Steve, before you jump into your
Yeah.
27 minutes, I was just going to say on behalf, I mean, really the membership, I mean, they need to know, and it's been so long ago, and it's like anything in the fire service or the police service, any type, your world too, Jay, as far as an employer, we celebrate our victories, but we celebrate them for a minute and then we move on. And I'm grateful for this board because the board has, one, since the beginning, has focused on a solid plan, a stable plan, a plan that, and a board that has worked collectively together with everybody's interest, trying to make sure that we move forward in a right way that, protects really the plan. That's what it's always been about. And for your work, and like I said, I mean, our organization from the State Council has recognized you as one of our leaders and so deserving. And this, the process of what you had started, talking about years ago has really moved into, so many benefits, and it has touched so many lives. And we talk about the work plan that we're looking forward to in the future. And if it's a way we can touch one person or correct it for two people, maybe we look at it. And that's exactly what you have done. So I'm grateful not only to call you a friend, but you're a great labor leader and probably one of the more valuable people in the state organization as far as the history of what we've done. So thank you.
Yeah, Mark's a very modest guy, and he does not highly trumpet the role that he had in creating the board. But I had a conversation with Mark's daughter, and he was one of the leaders, if not the leader, in the state council at trying to push this issue forward. And she told me about a time before the initiative came about. They were on a family vacation. They were out at the lake, and the family's out playing in the water and splashing in the water, and Dad, come in and swim with us. And Mark was on the shore literally with stacks of papers from state plans around the country, studying the governance of different boards around the country, trying to figure out what would make sense for a board to govern Washington. And so she shared that story with me because she wanted me to know just how invested was in the concept of governance. And the initiative, when it came out, it's fair to say it was controversial. And I know when I took this job, I had a bunch of people telling me I was making a big mistake and the initiative was going to be repealed in 2 years and I was going to be out of a job. But that concept of governance, doing it the right way, was so crucial to the board, and it's remained that way. And I think it's a testimony to the leadership of those original board members, and that culture is carried forward. So I wanted to, your daughter, I'm sharing your daughter's story, but that exemplifies, I think, the kind of commitment that Mark has had to the concept of governance from the beginning.
And to our team, I know that some of you are here and others are probably maybe joining online, but thank you to our left two board team here. They work very hard for all of us. They make us look good. I mean, I wish they could do something about the thinning on the screen. I wish I could look a little thinner, but sitting next to Steve, I actually look pretty good.
I'm helping you out there.
Help me out, buddy. But I, behind what we say, behind that curtain is a lot of great work that goes on. Our partners at DRS, OFM, the State Actuary's Office, all of the people that have worked. And it's all, again, going back to what you had envisioned, and really just, I'm just honored to be part of this group on a daily basis. So thank you. Thanks for recognizing him. Thanks for bringing it to our attention so we didn't forget, because we would have probably just moved on like we normally do. So thank you.
Had a couple of items of public comment that were already brought to your attention. The procedures for the public to comment are out on the website. We already mentioned the letter that was received by the member regarding the benefit improvement account month of retirement issue, and that was also the correspondence from the prior correspondence from City of Seattle. I don't know that, I'm not aware of any other written testimony that we received prior to the meeting.
Other than the one we received from Local 27, yeah.
Yeah.
And then just to remind people, because we do have, I think, I don't know how many guests are online right now, it doesn't say, but we may have a few guests. This is the opportunity, if anybody has anything to say in the public comments, we can welcome that, but I see a hand, but I don't know. Well, let's go RG, because I'm not sure who that is, but
RG is probably the Seattle Fire
the letter, yeah, thank you.
Whose letter I mentioned and was shared with all of you as email.
Correct.
Hi there. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ron Gershwin. I'm a retired Seattle firefighter. I am the one who sent the letter in, and I appreciate Steve bringing it up and giving me the time on the phone. And I appreciate all of you for your time and service. I've been here at this meeting with you guys since the beginning, so I'll keep it short too. I do appreciate it. My concern with the February 1 retirement date and the tiered multiplier choice or the lump sum benefit choice is just the contradictory language in the bill itself has never really been addressed either by the board or by DRS in both my appeal and my petition. And I don't know if you guys have 1701 available to you, but it says a couple of different things. It says in subsection 3 on page 2, members active in the retirement system on or before February 1 at retirement must make an irrevocable choice between the lump sum defined benefit in section 2 of this act or a tiered multiplier retirement as follows, and it explains it. So it still hasn't been explained to me why, if my retirement date as set by DRS is February 1, why I'm not considered somebody active in the retirement system on or before that date. So I should be given that choice. And it also says those same basic things at the bottom of that same page in the House bill on lines 32 to 36, which I included in my letter as well. It says members who are active in the plan on or before February 1 must make an irrevocable choice at retirement between the tiered multiplier benefit or a one-time lump sum. So I know that on lines 19 to 21, it says members who are retired on or before February 1 will receive a lump sum benefit, and that's it. But it also has those two other contradictory sections, and I don't know if that it's ever been addressed.
Okay, Ron, thank you for your comments. I mean, I'll obviously work with Steve, our executive director, make sure that we have an answer. And I think he's communicated that in some form, I think, to either President Stewart or yourself. And I'm not even going to try to answer that question without having some background.
Yeah, I've spoken with Ron and with President Stewart. They both were very reasonable. We had frank conversations. I let them know at least what the board intended, and that the way DRS is implementing the bill is consistent with the way that the board intended. And then and Ron's pursuing his appeal and petition over that contradictory language.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. That sounds about accurate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks for staying online too. I appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
All right, Teresa, I see you got your hand up and I can actually see you. Good morning.
Hello. I don't know how to put my hand down, but
Like
anyway,
this.
my hands are down. Okay, great. Thank you for doing that. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Taylor. I'm the executive director for the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs. I just want to take a quick minute, since Steve had brought it up earlier, and recognize the 20th anniversary of the Left to pension, and to thank all of you and all of your predecessors for the work you do on this board and how important it is to law enforcement across the state. Many of you know, but WACOPS represents over 5,000 boots on the ground officers, as well as hundreds of retired officers in the state. And your work is just terribly important. It may not always be exciting or riveting, but it's really, really valued. And thank you so very much for what you do.
Thanks, Teresa. I appreciate that. State Council has a great working relationship with your organization, and I'd be remiss for not, mentioning Kelly. I mean, Kelly was the long-term chair of this group, and I know I don't even know if he's on listening. He might be listening. Yeah. Believe me, I'll get a text if I don't say something. So now, a long-term chair of this group and worked with Mark and really spent hours working on this as well. So, and I'll reach out to him on the 1st and tell him happy other birthday, and he'll wonder what the heck I'm talking about, but want to make sure I recognize him as well. So, okay. No other comments, public comments? The other action that we potentially have, and we can wait till next month, but for planning purposes that might be helpful, we have historically canceled our August meeting, and it sounds like we have kind of an interim schedule. We have an agenda built up for July next month. We've adopted, July. For what we're going to accomplish next month, and then August we would take off, and we come back in September, and then October would be our workshop. So, is that correct?
That's correct. We'll go as a team. We'll review everything that took place today. We'll adjust the work plan, but it is my belief that we can still accomplish everything that you've assigned to us without the August meeting.
Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I would move to cancel the August meeting.
Thank you, Jay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and second to cancel our August meeting. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of canceling our August meeting say aye.
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 Those who want to meet can show up. Just kidding. All right. We'll cancel our August meeting. So thank you for that. It helps with planning. All right. So our next meeting is July 26th at 9:30. Administrative meeting at 8:30. So, is there anything else? Any actions? All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Motion's been made and
Seconded
to adjourn. Seeing no discussion. Tor, are you waving or you got to say something? I think he was just acknowledging goodbye.
I am saying, I am in support of the motion to adjourn, even though I don't get a vote.
Well, I saw you. I don't want to cut you off. If I cut you off, I get in trouble. So, all right. We have a motion that's made and seconded to adjourn. Seeing no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We are adjourned. And thank you, everybody, for staying with us.